And sorry to be a few minutes late, folks. Thanks to all of you for joining us today for the Disaster Bundle Fireside Chat. Crystal, if you can go to the next slide, we'll just run through a couple of the disclosures that we always do. So as you all know, the EIC is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration under HHS. And so any of the content that we share and or conclusions should not be construed as the official position or policy of the U.S. government, but are those of the author who will be presenting herein. And if you go to the next slide, we will, of course, be offering continuing nursing education for this live session, which is being provided through the Emergency Nurses Association, and will account for 1 contact hour of CNE credit. If you'll go to the next slide, there are no specific conflicts of interest that any of the faculty, speakers, or planners for this event have disclosed, and there's no commercial support. If you do detect any bias in this presentation, feel free to note that on the evaluation. And then the next slide, please remember that in order to obtain the Nurse CE, that you do need to sign into the webinar, specifically with your name and email address, as well as the name of your facility. And then at the completion of the presentation, you'll see the link to the short evaluation, and that needs to be completed within 2 weeks. And again, the link you can see here as well. And then I believe it's also been posted in the chat box. So if you need to, you're welcome to look there. And then you will get your CE certificate within 48 hours of that. So just as a reminder, the aim for the PRQC overall, of course, is that all of the participating teams will collectively improve their PEDS readiness scores by 10 points. But more specifically for the Pediatric Disaster Preparedness Bundle, the goal is that by the end of the collaborative, now April 2020, that 100% of sites participating in this bundle will have a disaster plan that addresses the 4 essential domains of pediatric disaster preparedness that are outlined in the implementation bundle. So today we are very fortunate to have Oscar Enriquez speak to us. Oscar is both an EMT as well as the program manager for the Hospital Emergency Preparedness and Response Team at Dell Children's Medical Center in Central Texas, which is located in Austin. He has over 25 years of experience in emergency preparedness. He has been responsible for developing, advancing, and implementing training policies and capabilities to improve frontline preparedness at Dell Children's and across the entire Seton Healthcare network. He led the hospital response team for Hurricanes Katrina and Ike, and also for H1N1 response. And I think notably, he has been commended by both the regional trauma advisory councils here in Texas, as well as by the Office of Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, the American College of Surgeons, and the Joint Commission for Best in Practice for the HURT program, which is what he's going to be discussing today. He's worked with very small hospitals to help them implement disaster preparedness plans, and specifically with pediatric-specific focus. And we're really excited to have him speak about some of the practical steps to implementing this in your facility. So Oscar, I'll turn it over to you. And just also by way of just introducing, we're very happy to also have Pat Frost, Dr. Steve Krug, Brent Kasny, and Sarita Chung available as subject matter experts for this bundle, and they may be jumping in and providing some additional comments and expertise throughout the talk. So,
and Kate, you also have Dr. Ariel Fusco on the line representing this bundle as well.
Wonderful. Fabulous. So, Oscar?
Yes. Thank you very much for this great opportunity and I'm excited. And what I want to present is the program that has been established for many reasons, and with how effective and efficient it has been. And I want to start with the next slide, presentation objectives. So the outline, I'm going to present the outline of the HURT program at Dell Children's and the HURT training content and what makes the program efficient and effective. Next slide. The HURT program outline, I'm going to go over the history, the team profile, the participation process, which is the prerequisites, credentialing, the forms, and what status the members are during their tenure in the program. Next slide. With the history, one of the things that I wanted to bear in mind, when I first started my early 90s at Brackenridge, the trauma center there, the pediatric area was a small hallway with only 3 rooms. We only had 3 pediatric nurses, and so the challenges then was to have carts identified and branded as pediatric only. So the HURT program has evolved since then. In 2007, basically we used to cross-train everybody how to do decon and alternate care sites. And shortly after 9/11, when the federal government started releasing funding, we started getting military-grade equipment, which is all the decon shelters. At that point, there was no way that I could cross-train everybody, and that's when the inception of creating a team started. So this program is also a subgroup of our hospital emergency management steering team, and the focus of this frontline specialized group is what do we do in the first 15 to 30 minutes to an hour before the hospital incident command stands up. As we know, sometimes the hospital incident command takes a while to stand up, depending on what the event is going to be. However, patients, they're going to start coming in. So that's what the frontline group does. The HURT program has progressed to become a template also for the Texas Ascension Ministry of Hospitals. Next. So the team profile, we have HURT instructors, and the training that we have is we go to Anniston and we get our instructor train the trainer course, and also the integrated capstone event. It's all together all in 1 week. We have a total of 8 instructors in our hospital. We comprise of emergency department physicians, with a trauma surgeon, trauma nurses, which Lisa Nichols, if she's on the line, she's one of our HURT instructors, safety officer, and then myself as an emergency preparedness coordinator. For small facilities, you may have only one HURT instructor trainer, on top of all your additional duties. One of the things that we've helped one of our small outlying hospitals is they've had a challenge on who leads the emergency response team. So we kind of been working on them to ensure that hospital emergency management is part of their additional duties. Some people are the safety officer. They're also the director for that department or for that hospital. So I know that there's challenges for small outlying hospitals. Next slide. So our team profile, we have 21 HURT members. We have ED nurses, techs, respiratory. Other disciplines include NICU, PICU, hematology, ECMO. For smaller hospitals, you don't have all those specialties, but for this program, we've grown to what it is now. The team consistently sustains the minimum of 21 members, and we'll go over that 21 portion right now. This sustains continuity in order to provide coverage for 24/7. The member tenure, so we have 20% that are 2 years, 16% that are greater than 6 years in the program, 18 that are 8 years, 15 that are 12 years, and the remaining balance of new members. So the reason the tenure percentages are displayed is because, for example, during the Ebola event that took place in 2015, which is shy of 4 years ago, 50% of the team tenure is greater than 6 years. Turnover is high within hospitals. Back then in 2015, the turnover rate was 19.2%. So the cost of turnover is profound impact on retraining. So cost-saving measures is to train key associates that can be on-site 24/7. By all means, the herd training members will minimize the impact on patient care and on the cost. So just by having a program doesn't mean that we're going to be doing all the work. It's just frontline, what we do in the first hour. Next slide. So the completion of the prerequisites that we do is consistent with the FEMA standards. So we request for 100s, 200s, and 700s. And we have a participation form, a medical screening form, the member expectations and responsibilities, training and attendance guidelines. And as a member's tenure, they also have the ability to go to Anniston and train if they are interested. Again, maintaining consistency on the top of training is very key importance. Next slide. The participation form we use here is pretty much the skeleton structure as the one that we have to fill out for FEMA. So the top portion is just the program objectives for here for Dell Children's. And then the midsection, baseline training, is just to get an idea of what type of training you currently have prior to entering the program. The ID information is basically your photo ID, your FEMA SID number, your cell phone, your carrier, and we'll go over that, why that's important. And as far as the badge ID, in our facility, we have a lot of badge access because it's a children's hospital, so we need to ensure that the emergency response team has access to various areas. At the bottom is the program training levels. Basically, we keep track of where you are with your training during the tenure in your program. Next slide. The medical screening form here also, again, it's part of the structure, the form that you have to fill out before you go to Anniston. So for us, it's basically a baseline screening. We update it yearly. It's just to give us an idea of what your medical status is in case you're diabetic, you're claustrophobic. So we kind of maintain a good safety throughout your training. The second portion is basically medical clearance, and that's as needed, and if you have any health restrictions. Next slide. This member status form is a spreadsheet that I created just to keep track of all the HERT members. And for example, there's the midsection where it has all the A's and P's. That gives me an idea of which group members can take care of pediatric. That's all the P's, and which ones can take care of adults. So if we go into alternative care site, I know which team members need to go to which locations just to maintain a balance. It gives me the idea of when they started. I keep track of their badge ID, their SID numbers, when they started, when their medical screening form was done, when it's due next, and all their courses that they've had throughout our training. Next slide. Our HERT training content basically consists of boot camp training. We have a testing. We have team member responsibilities, decon gear and storage, medical equipment and supply storage, emergency notification, patient tracking, and your triannual training, and which is identified as our hazard vulnerabilities. Next slide. Our boot camp training is pretty much it's a 2-day on-the-go boot camp. It's robust. That's our basic startup. We started this process to prevent from, if a new member comes on board, it doesn't keep us from moving forward in our training. And when they go through the boot camp training, they are at the same level as the other members. Within the 2-day boot camp training, we go over personal protective equipment, your PPE donning and doffing, go over their communication radios, decon room process, hands-on with simulation, decon shelter, deployment, equipment readiness check, alternate care site, mobilization and demobilization. And one of the things, like for small hospitals, when they're creating their emergency plan, or if they're creating a HURT type training for key individuals, is just to be realistic on your expectations and capabilities in your area, and just incorporate organization. That helps a lot. Have a consistent process. Our consistent process is basically FEMA's consistency in their training. For example, there's a lot of agencies that offer also decon training. It's not that it's right from wrong, but for our consistency, we tend to plug into the decon from Anniston. And then as a huge reminder that I want to put out there is, don't forget about pediatric patients. Next slide. This boot camp terminology test is basically, I give them a packet and it has all the pictures of all the equipment and gear that we will be dealing with. And the testing is pretty much multiple choice and it's easy, but the reason I give them this test is when we're training and we're talking amongst each other regarding equipment, or we need to get X, Y, Z, we need to be on the same page on what we are talking about. That's the purpose of the terminology test. Next page. The team member responsibility. So I keep track of this responsibilities. So what we do in our training is I have to size up everybody with the suit size, their glove size, their boot size, their exam glove size, their sterile glove size, even scrub size. And we'll go over that portion right there in a little bit. When their bag was assigned, every member is going to have a set of gear assigned to them. What we used to do is, when we first started, we started with 4 decon bags that were provided from the federal government. And when we were to size people, we would get the paper, and then we would go over to see what size we needed. But then we never knew if that paper was used, when it was cleaned last, and so forth. So now this is ownership, and they have to take care of their own gear. So their primary responsibility is their decon gear and inside contents, the outside contents, which is your boots, your cool vest, and they all have a second unique responsibility. And we'll go to the next slide. The two-way radios, one of the things that we go over the two-way radios is basically reiterating good radio etiquette, how to replace the battery, and just being good stewardships on the radio care. Next slide. This is the cool vest and the earpieces, the storage. What this does, it just keeps the accessories and the cables intact, freeing of entanglement and damage prevention, keeps the Velcro straps intact, durable hanging, keeps the vest accessories intact, and even weight distribution. This is very effective on the go. You just get that hanger and you're on the go. Next slide. So this is a quick illustration of what the cool vest does. What I did is, if the people on the phone, if they've ever done decon, when you put your communication equipment on waist level, you put your suit on, and then you have your PAPR, it's also in the waist level. So what I have done is had a upholstery shop put a strap on the top. So now all the equipment gear is at the top. And it can also be used for when you're setting up an alternate care site during hot weather, you can use your cool pack as well. So that's very effective. Next slide. Our decon gear and storage, just having uniformity, it's an ease and accountability and of all the assigned gear. This organized method just helps to locate items quickly and helps maintain the healthy life of all the gear. As you know, federal government equipment is very expensive. The number system helps in uniformity and also on the bag assignment. It's easy and for identifying and helps keep track of all the gear when needing repair. Next slide. So what we have in our decon bag we have donning tags that I created. And these donning tags is basically, we operate as a buddy system. So we, as we're gearing up, we help each other out when we're donning. And this first card to the left, check number 1, is pretty much to the point. Before you gear up, empty your bladder, fuel check, hydration, your baseline vital signs. You can't proceed until you go through the next step. And also for your donning, you have your instructions onto the far right. So that's essentially the back of the other card. Next slide. So here you are, we have the picture of our decon bag. So this one's assigned to Sarah. Sarah uses a size 2X suit, the boot size 8, glove size 8. And then you have on the middle, you see your water, that's for hydration. There's your power bar in case somebody's diabetic or hasn't eaten. You don't know how long you're going to be in the suit for. And then you have your buddy system check logs. You have your scissors, and each member has 3 suits. The decon, go ahead. The decon gear tag, it shows what the contents are inside the bag. That's the first top portion. And then the outside content, which is your lacrosse boots, your cool vest, your Motorola radio, and your mics. So those are your responsibilities. And then on the outside, you have one of your responsibilities, which is unique. So when it comes to circulating all of the supply, this person has to circulate all the IV fluids so they won't expire. Next slide. This emergency equipment and supply storage tells us where all of the emergency supply storage is located. For the immediate care area, all these cards are located outside the EMS entrance in a storage closet. All of the ones that are delayed, they are stored in the storage for our air rescue unit. And then all of the decontents in alternate care site, they are stored in a non-temperature controlled. And it tells you what the access level is, whether it's badge reader, or key access. Next slide. So we have 2 emergency notification responses. One is called Sendware Now. That's an electronic app. And basically, all the members, that's one of the reasons I get their carriers and their phone numbers. We plug them into the Sendware Now system. So all the members participating in a random monthly notification check. So what I do is once a month randomly, I send a notification and they have to respond back with their ETAs. And their ETAs that's requested from them is their real response time and ETAs. If they're stuck in traffic and there's going to be 20 minutes, it's 20 minutes. If you're out of town, then you're out of town. If you're 15 minutes away, you're 15 minutes away. So essentially, the averages of 15-minute increments for the first hour to not available to respond, our typical average is 49% are available to respond within 15 to 30 minutes. Then we have the immediate recall tree. That's a downtime notification in case the Sendware Now app or the electronic app is down. We have a alternate downtime notification system, it's a recall tree, and it's comprised of 3 branches. It has the HERT team branch, the charge nurse branch, and the medical provider branch. Next slide, please. This is how the immediate recall tree looks like. On the left, you have the response team. On blue, all the charge nurses. In green, you have all the physicians. So essentially, if the charge nurse and our house supervisor deems we should activate, they call our medical director, and he will dictate if we are to deploy the team, half the team, or the whole tree, which comprises of 3 branches. Next slide. Each member from each particular tree has one of these tags. For example, this is the immediate recall tag for the emergency response team. The ones that are highlighted in blue is because they are also charge nurses or managers. And of course, the one on the top is green because he's a physician. But that's essentially our immediate recall tree. Our medical director will contact the first that's outlined in red and communicate out exactly what's going on. And verbatim, the clinical manager will call the next one in line, which is on the far left. That's the line. And then in the middle, and then the far right. And each person only calls one person, which is the one below them. The one below them continues on. And once they get to the end, for example, in this person, Kim or Shayla or Diana, they're gonna call back to the top and say, we got a hold of everybody, or so-and-so is running late, or we couldn't get a hold of someone. And those are essentially the instructions that are in the back of the tag. Next slide. What I did is I created a HURT daily assignment board. Essentially, it's 3 portions of the same tag. Next slide. How it works is we have an incident command display cabinet, and what the clerk does in the morning is they circle who's here in the response team at 7 a.m. What about 11 a.m.? What about 3 p.m.? And at 7 p.m., the evening clerk comes in and circles who's on at 7 p.m., 11 p.m., and 3 a.m. So at any given time, we know who's on from the hospital emergency response team in case something is going on at the time. Next slide. This Hurley daily assignment board is just a closer view. Next slide. Here we have the patient intake card. This patient intake card is basically designed for when we have a surge or a code triage. It's the front line. This card has, on the side, we have all your incident command best, who's in charge of the event, and so forth. That card consists of the top drawer, all of the office supplies that you will need: pens, markers, pads, staplers, paper clips, allergy bands, triage tags. And in the middle, you have all these clipboards. We have a total of 200 downtime charts for the immediate care and 200 downtime charts for the delayed care. We have to combine them. We can combine them. As you know, in a large-scale mass casualty, patient registration is not going to be able to keep track, even with the resources of registering all the patients. So we have downtime charting. Next slide. The patient tracking, one of the things when there's a surge, a tip to consider is having only one leader in your department to lead the event is going to be very, very effective. Only one chief is very effective. As you know, an event during the daytime, you have directors, managers, everybody wants to have an input, but when there's multiple chiefs, it's not effective. So you have to designate one leader for the event. During a surge, as you know, pediatric casualties duplicate quickly. Consider immediate requests for resources. So what we have here is a surge trigger point to request for internal resources. And when 8 pages overhead, resources go down to the ED, and there's an area that we allocated as an ED labor pool. So not everybody flocks to the ER, and you don't know who's working or who's just the viewer, as some of the hospitals may experience that. And then we deploy the HERT team as needed. So this triage card, we have those pre-made, pre-labeled downtime disaster charts, and has pre-made patient labels and bracelets and all the documentation you will need in downtime. As far as registration, we have the quick registration using the alias disaster names and unique registration numbers to activate accounts. Because some of the patients, you're not going to be able, if they're unconscious, we're not going to know what their names are. And also using disaster downtime names, it separates the event. So in case for federal reimbursement, we can tell which patients were from what event on that day. And as far as patient tracking, we use the HICS 254 form, and we kind of tailor it and pre-populated some things in that tracking form just to help us. For our capabilities, we have, again, a total of 400 pre-made disaster downtime charts. They've also helped when we've had our power failures. So we go into downtown process mode. We have all the charts. We have all the labels. We have unique numbers to keep track of all the patients. Next slide. So the patient tracking, the downtime patient chart, it consists of the patient chart. So what we do is we keep track of any changes on the chart as you go along throughout the years. This is the old version. We need to create the new version. We also have patient labels. We have a lot of patient labels that can be used for labeling specimens, labeling charts, and so forth. And we also have the patient bracelet. Next slide. This is a Hicks 254 form. What we did is we pre-populated whatever is in red or color. That's what we added to this form. And also I expanded the rows on here just to be able to put a patient label on there. We have also pre-populated adult children's on there, the incident command number, and then also the email that goes to the incident command. Next slide, please. So on our triannual training, the training is separated from the mandatory yearly requirements. So our training is comprised of decon jump bags and gear check, our decon training, pediatric and adult, ambulatory, non-ambulatory, infant and carry. And what we do during our training, we do spontaneous alternate care site. So during our training, they know that there's going to be an exercise, but they don't know what the scenario is going to be. They don't know if I have volunteers that are going to be staged as patients. So I deploy out the scenario, and then they take off on setting an alternate care site and seeing patients. So that's one of the things that we continue on in our training and keep everybody up to date with where the carts are located and how the layouts are set out and so forth. We also have in our carts a lot of pre-planned layouts of multiple ways to set up an alternate care site, whether it's underneath our helipad, outside our ER loading dock, or if it's in an alternate care site location, if it's in an auditorium. We have a lot of layouts. They just reference it and then they follow it. One of the things that we do also is we rotate all of the stock. As you notice in one of those responsibility tags, that person was in charge of IV fluids. Each member is assigned a unique responsibility, like rotating the IV cards, rotating the ortho card, oxygen tanks. So we no longer look for expiration dates. We just circulate all the stock yearly and keeps fresh stock. Next slide. When we do our training, we pretty much target our hazard vulnerabilities, and those are the type of trainings that we do. And one of the things that gets left out a lot, which we don't have frequent, but we do decon, and then we do our weather events. One of our vulnerabilities currently is we're in tornado season, and then we also do evacuations. Next slide. Here is our patient decontamination action chart. Pretty much it's a visual. Sometimes you tend to see plans and they're narrative. So it's kind of hard to read it through and do exactly what we need to do. So what I've done is I provide a lot of layouts, so they're visual. So here it tells you what you do if a patient comes in, POV, air, or EMS, and then they follow that process through. Next slide. In our decon room, what I have is on the wall, we have number cards laminated, and it tells you what you do in that zone if it's a caregiver and carried, what you do if it's an ambulatory, and what you do if it's a patient in a stretcher. And that's our decon process from zone 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then out to the clean zone. As an example, if you look at the next slide, this is how big the card is. This is zone 2. If it's caregiver and carried, you decon the patient for 5 minutes, use soap as needed, and then move to zone 3, and so forth. If it's a patient in ambulatory, that's what they do in zone 2. Same with a stretcher. Next slide. Our decon training, one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to time everything. Everything is timing. As I mentioned before, during a surge, pediatrics duplicate quickly. EMS is coming, sometimes in short notice. So we're constantly training and we're constantly taming and keeping also safety in mind. Next slide. Our decon training here is in our decon shelter. We have the hot zone, decon zone, and the clean zone. And just a huge reminder, don't forget about pediatric patients. Consider different lanes for boys and girls, or girls first, then boys. We have to maintain modesty, in the children and the youth. Next slide. So this weather event is our training for tornadoes. This is our patient staging. One of the things that we tend to do is we tend to keep things as realistic as possible. When you train as realistic as possible, good opportunities come from it. If you don't train as close to realism and opportunities come up, it's going to be based on scenarios that will not likely tend to occur, and all that work you put into it and the opportunities that are going to come out are not going to be realistic. The hospital visitors are also pediatric, so if something happens in your facility, whether you have to evacuate or something happens, regarding a tornado, there's also pediatric visitors. We have to maintain patient tracking during disasters. That's when it's most vulnerable for kidnapping, etc. Next slide. So this is an example of our tornado, weather alert, tornado imminent evacuation layout. It's a quick visual. I jumped from tornado watch all the way to imminent. So everything that's outlined in red or pink, that's where all of the ED patients and personnel will go. That's the safest zone right there. So it's a quick measure. That's all we do. Don't think twice. Next slide. This is our weather event, our tornado deployment. What we did once is I deployed the team. A tornado hit one of our patient care areas. Team A goes and deploys an alternate care site in the auditorium. Team B performs a search and rescue. Next slide. This is our, am I on the correct slide? Is this the tornado staging area or search and rescue?
You're on the evacuation layout.
Evacuation layout.
The weather event, tornado training, patient staging?
Yes, okay, so the next slide is
the layout of the hospital in case of a tornado alert.
Okay, so I have not been in sync, I guess, with you. Okay, so that's the layout. So after the layout, you have tornado deployment. Yes?
Correct.
Okay, so on this is a tornado deployment. As I was saying earlier, Team A goes and deploys an alternate care site, the search and rescue. Next slide. This is our staging area for tornado in our auditorium. Next slide. This is weather event tornado search and rescue. As you see, what I did is I gathered a lot of rubble from a newly refreshed, they were renovating an area. So we trashed a whole area, we closed it, and we staged volunteers. These are pretty much all of the family members from the hurt members and their spouses as posing as patients. Next slide. You see here on this search and rescues, we have to tend to get creative as backboards because backboards we may not have, and we tend to get creative. Here they use a conference room table. One of the after action webinar that I took after the Joplin tornado is that the ceiling was exposed. A lot of people got puncture wounds on their tennies because the majority of the healthcare workers, they wear tennies. They had to go through rubble, so they were cutting their hands by removing debris to get to patients. And so one of the things that we did is here we supplied all of her team members hard hats and work gloves to remove rubble. And we also starting to use our decon boots because they have a steel shank, so we have to go through rubble. And we also have jump packs that they said you have any life-saving measures that, pretty much stop the bleed. So there's no Band-Aids in there, just exam gloves and any pressure dressings. Have a whistle, because during the rubble, sometimes, they couldn't hear people, so a whistle will work really well. Have light sticks instead of flashlight batteries or in addition to. So those were good learnings from Joplin tornado. Next slide. This is the patient care area. That's the team A that went and set up the alternate care site, and then they're starting to see patients that arrive from the search and rescue team members. And one of the things that's very effective is we operate as a buddy system. Next slide. Here we talk about our evacuation and training. So we create training points. We have our traffic control on slide 1, radio check, and then we have our checkpoints. One of the things that we should take into account for all patients at exit points, we have to account for them. Transport any patients charting or having downtime discharge process, available AMA forms. Patients are going to want to leave. Next slide. This evacuation training, as the patients and families carry an ambulatory and non-ambulatory. Next slide. Our evacuation training, we had a hot wash, pretty much a debriefing of the event with our first responders. We collaborated with the Austin Fire Department. And then again, all the patients that got evacuated, they were the spouses of our hurt members. So a good opportunity came from all of the family members. One was, you brought us out, now what? So we have to have a secondary plan, how long is the long-term staging area. The fire department, one of the key points was, when you evacuate, consider that patients are going to want to leave. So the most important checkpoint is right at the exit. Next slide. So what makes the program efficient and effective? Next slide. One of the things is, as I pointed earlier, we have staging areas. We have one leader. We have pre-planned alternate care site layouts. As far as logistics, we have the HERT team, or we have internal resources that come to the ED labor pool. So all that is when our trigger point goes into a surge mode, all that goes into an automated process. And what that does is buys time if the hospital command stands up or doesn't stand up in time, or if all of their key personnel in the incident command have arrived or not. All this is in play until the incident command stands up. What makes it efficient? So we have regional and administration support. Regional support, we're tied in with our Capital Area Trauma Regional Advisory Council. We were tied in with the school districts in terms when we train, pre-hospital agencies, volunteers, and staff. That goes a long way. Sometimes Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, they come and help us out. Our elementary schools, as far as hospital administration support, as funding is needed, and our department administration support, having allocated hours for our training. The other thing is, next slide, our family and staff support. Once a member comes on board, essentially your family comes on board with a program. They have a key understanding of when we train. Essentially, we train on Sundays. And one of the things that's successful as far as our training when we train on Sundays is that all of the members, they're on board. They wanted to train on Sundays because a lot of them, they're students, so they want to run their errands on Saturdays, and during the week they have school. So they all chose Sundays, and that's how we've always left it. The other thing as far as the training dates, what's been successful is having predetermined training dates. For example, for us, our training is usually the weekend after Easter. So the things that I have to dodge is basically that it doesn't fall on Easter Sunday, Palm Sunday, if there's any testing or people are on spring break. And in the fall, in September, we have a September training session, and that one is usually after Labor Day weekend. No one's on vacation, school just started, there's no finals. And then in December, we have one the weekend after Thanksgiving. Again, no one's on vacation, no one has finals, there's no Christmas parties, and so forth. So those training dates has been very successful, and we have our training dates already posted for 2020. One of the things that we can take from this is when you are doing all your disaster cards, is having the cards identified as pediatric, like for instance, the respiratory cards, making sure you have neo to child cannulas, rebreathers, ambu bags, anesthesia bags. The blades incorporate 00 blades to 0 blades. On the medical supply cards, small sizes, IV catheters, heel warmers, phlebotomy microtainers, butterflies, small arm boards, linen cards, pediatric gowns. You have, blankets, washcloths, towels, baby shampoo. As far as your general supply, you can have like baby bottles, Pedialyte, pacifiers, nipples, formulas, diapers, and so forth. Ortho cards. Don't forget to get the Neo to sling, arm slings, the crutches, toddler crutches, seat collars. As far as equipment cards, all sizes of blood pressure cuffs, incorporate your pulse oximetries, rectal thermometers, small size ear speculums, and so forth. One of the things that we recently added to our emergency supply cart are backpacks. The backpacks have essentially like comfort measures, like teddy bears. You have mini blankets, coloring books, crayons, bubbles, Play-Doh, mini games like Connect 4 or Clue. We also have a sensory for special needs kids. We have special needs toys as a sensory motor kit, and those are very effective. Next slide. So there was a publication done in our program in 2017 under the Domestic Preparedness Journal, and the program, How to Sustain an Emergency Preparedness and Response for Hospitals. We led the issue, and it was very an eye-opener on the findings that was done on all our research regarding emergency management. For instance, all the turnover that we talked about earlier, and hospitals nowadays, when you do minimal training just to simply check the box, anything that the accreditors only want, and so forth. So it outlined a lot of those key things. I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for all that wonderful information. These slides and the recording will, of course, be posted to the website for anyone to access if need be. but if you have specific questions for Oscar, please feel free to go ahead and enter those into the chat box so he can address them, and or any of the other subject matter experts who happen to be on the call can also help to address any potential questions. So I know there were a lot of tools and resources that you shared, Oscar. Would it be possible to take some of those, like the tracking tool and the like, and post those onto the website for others to maybe try to adapt to their own institution's needs?
Yes.
Awesome. There is a question in the chat box from Erica. How did you get buy-in from leadership? In Wisconsin, we've had a few natural disasters, so sometimes it's hard to get everyone on board. Can you speak to that?
Well, the first thing is proving that one thing is organization. If everything is organized and people see that it's organized, people are going to jump on board. The second thing is when we did the organization and started the program, and CATRAC, when they did an assessment that it was best in practice, that kind of started the trend of best in practice and a buy-in on training.
Do any of the other subject matter experts have any other thoughts on how to bring in leadership?
Yeah, this is Rita Chung. I think you're totally right. I think leadership is very key. One thing we found out is really how to integrate emergency management into the continuity of business operations so that it's not that only you stand up incident command when you have a disaster, you stand it up for the daily things that happen in the hospital, whether it's a flooding, whether it's a power outage, so that people practice this. And then the other thing is not to put in the fear factor, but I think mass casualty events, I don't think the leadership would like to be caught unaware, and so to practice something to that extent, because I think that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when there's going to be a mass casualty in your area.
Hi, this is Pat Frost. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. In California, one of the things that have really helped us get buy-in at, a really high level is really doing our homework in terms of the data and presenting the data in terms of the lay of the land, in terms of the current resources. For instance, in California, pediatric capability is really hyper-regionalized, and I think that's the case in most of the United States. But between 1990 and 2009, when we went ahead and did our bed capacity analysis, we found that we had lost over 20% of pediatric bed capacity, and this caught all parties by surprise. And, these things evolve because, everybody is very focused on what they're doing in the here and now. They don't necessarily make changes in context. So, as care became in pediatrics more pushed to the outpatient and regional centers became more concentrated and consolidated and merged and those types of things, there was a disproportional reduction in pediatric bed capacity. It worked great for the day-to-day, but it created some unique challenges for surge and what needed to be done to address gaps in those issues, especially on the patient movement side. So by, putting together data, on the lay of the land in your local community, how many kids you have, what are their ages, how many potential children you might have. There's calculators for determining, injury rates and those types of things that can give you really strategic information about how much equipment, how much training, what to expect. We really have the tools in place now to be able to look at these issues a lot more strategically.
Thank you, Pat. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? We know that this type of program does not come together overnight, and I'm sure Oscar can attest to the amount of hours and work that he put into developing a program like this and how it's grown over the years. But all of the subject matter experts on the call, including Oscar, can really speak to how to start something like this on a much smaller scale and just at the local level. And if you do have any questions around that, I would recommend reaching out so that we can help get you in touch with them directly and they can address some of your questions. Since we are nearly at the top of the hour, those of you hoping to receive CNE credit, please don't forget to go to the REDCap link that's located in the chat box so that you can complete the evaluation and receive your certificate. Oscar, Sarita, Pat, Ariel, many thanks to you all for being on the phone. And many thanks to all of you who joined us today. We appreciate your time, and we hope this was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.